anybody need any forms?
You good?
Hold on. Yeah, if you can come, let me know. There's somebody here. I got
All right. You guys done yet?
Hold on.
My gosh, man, taking up the whole entire group. Can you shut that door back there too when you get a chance? All right. First order of business, I'm going to pass this sheet around, and if you don't mind giving us your name, phone number, and email so we can keep in contact with you. If we already have it, you can just put already on file. If you're not comfortable with that, that's fine too. My name's Rich Jones. I'm the CEO and the COO here at Favor Greenville, and I'm a person in long-term recovery myself. A lot of different things involved in my past, but really the thing that kind of brought me to my knees or really defined my recovery process was prescription drugs, prescription pain pills. In 1999, I was in a car accident. I was sitting at a red light and I was rear-ended, and I wound up kind of with a documented neck injury. I had whiplash, and I just started getting these pain pills hand over fist, and the first thing you know, I'm kind of like strung out on these things. I didn't know what that was, didn't know what to make of that, never experienced anything like an addiction like that. I never had those withdrawal symptoms, didn't even know what they were called. And so fortunately I wound up in recovery. I've been in recovery for 16 years. And I've used drug or alcohol for 16 years. And my life has changed tremendously because of that. I went back to school, became a therapist, worked in a lot of different clinical settings, been here at Favor Greenville for about 4.5 years, maybe even longer than that. Coming up on 5 years at Favor Greenville. That's unbelievable. Time flies. You guys are such wonderful people. Being around you is like pure bliss. And so time flies. Done a bunch of these family groups. Tonight, I thought I would go in a little bit of a different direction. I have a topic, and I want to talk a little bit about some of the classics. I thought we would do a throwback. You ever about Throwback Thursday, that kind of thing? Talk about codependency and enabling tonight, and where those concepts come from, and maybe ways to deal with that, different ways to identify if you feel like you're falling into some of those patterns, but then more importantly, what? Cope with that and move through that. But before I do that, that's kind of like my topic. Does anybody have any other ideas or issues that they're dealing with or topics that they want to talk about tonight that we can try to cover? I can probably weave it into this presentation, but does anybody dealing with anything that they feel like they got to get some ideas about? And if not, that's okay. We can bring it up. You can bring it up as you go through. You can ask any questions you have, but if you have one, ask it. Yes, sir.
As a parent, where's the line between enabling and trying to...
And support.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if everyone could hear the question, but the question was, what's the line between enabling and support? And I think it's a great question, and it's probably the most honest question that anybody dealing with this issue can ask. It's the most common question. How do I know whether I'm enabling the person, or how do I know whether I'm supporting the person? So every program has cliches. We're no different. We have our own little cliches around this. We talk about, I'll support you in your recovery, but I won't support you in your addiction, as a defining guideline, if you will. Now, underneath each of those categories, all kinds of different things can fall. So obvious ways to support somebody in their recovery would be what? Getting them in a treatment program, helping them find a treatment program, helping them get into an intensive outpatient program, giving them a ride to an AA meeting, giving them maybe allowing and supporting them a little bit while they do early recovery, that kind of thing. That's examples of kind of, I'll support you in your recovery. I'll support you in your addiction. That's on the other side of the coin. I won't support you in your addiction. Supporting somebody in their addiction would be things like continuing to pay the rent even though the money's going to drugs, right? That would be a really good example. Continuing to okay bad behavior, allowing yourself to be mistreated by the person and not setting any boundaries. That's supporting the addiction. Does that make sense? But I think that underneath those two categories, it gets really interesting because there can be gray areas. There can be absolute black and white areas. I will not support that. But then there are all these other things in the middle that, maybe, how do I know whether this is supporting recovery? How do I know whether this is supporting addiction? That's why we recommend talking to people about it, asking specific questions related to that. If you look at around supporting people, a lot of times it'll come down to what? Financial support. Would you agree with that? It's not always financial support, but a lot of times that's where, unfortunately, that's kind of how the conversation plays out. And ultimately, it kind of leads to this pathway. If you follow people, it leads to this pathway where there's some very basic conversations that people start to have. You can no longer live here if, fill in the blank, right? How many people have thought that or heard that in here? That's not uncommon. You can no longer live here if. I will no longer support you if. That kind of thing. And we're going to talk a lot about those type of issues tonight. What other questions or thoughts regarding this stuff? Yes, sir.
How do you get, if you have a spouse, how do you get both of you on board? It's saying working together.
So when it comes to setting boundaries, his question is, how do you get everybody working together? How do you get people on the same page? And it's not just spouse. It's not just mom and dad. It's also grandma. It's also Aunt Susie, Uncle George. What? It could be Uncle George, right? It could be anybody. It could be boyfriend, girlfriend, anybody who's important to the person. How do you get them all on the same page? Does anyone else want to try to take and answer that? Anybody else have any experience they would share about getting people on the same page? All right, I'm going to give the answer then. So the first thing you got to do is you got to fill the person out and you got to see where they stand on it. So you have to have a conversation about this very, very difficult issue. So literally, if you want to know whether or not you and your wife are on the same page, you have to sit down and calmly, let's emphasize calmly, have a conversation about where they stand on this matter. And you have to kind of ask clear questions about these issues. So if my wife and I are dealing with this, and I have this opinion in my mind that we got to quit paying the rent. This isn't working. I know he's partying every weekend, and I know he's short every month, but I'm still, we're still kicking in what, $300 a month, $500 a month. We got to stop that. I have to sit down and literally get her opinion on this. I have to get her take on this. And there's a key skill that you have to have. And all the guys in the room, listen very closely to this. I'm a master at this. Oh, Gay, you're laughing like that? Like that's not possible? If my wife's out there in Facebook land, please shout out, I am a master at this. Actually, I'm horrible at this. So there's two ways to listen. One is listen to answer versus listen to learn. Anybody know the difference between the two? Listen to answer versus listen to learn. Listen to answer is, Meg's talking to me, and while she's talking, I'm not even really paying attention to her. I'm formulating my response to her. So I go into the conversation with Meg, and I have an opinion on what we should do with our kid. And as we start the conversation, I'm not actually trying to have a conversation with her. What am I trying to do? Convince her I'm right. Do you guys get that? I'm going into this conversation about this heavy-duty issue called addiction, this heavy-duty life or death issue, and we're walking in, and I'm not thinking, let's see what she has to say. Maybe she actually has something valuable to say. I'm literally thinking, okay, how do I get her to see things my way? What do I say to her? How do I, quote-unquote, win this debate so that when we leave here today, she agrees, and we're going to do it my way? If you approach it that way, guys, you're going into this. You're probably going into this setting yourself up for failure. It's probably not going to go well. Why is it not going to go well?
If you've already made up your mind, you want it your way, and this is what you're going to do. I like how you said that. Go in with what can I learn.
So if you go into the situation, you've already had your mind made up, what's going to happen is the other person is going to know that. How are they going to know it? You're not going to walk in and say, okay, here's the deal, Meg. I'm right. You're wrong. Let me explain to you how I'm right and you're wrong. You're not going to say that. How is the other person going to know? Your body language, your tone of voice. One of the most powerful things I ever heard anyone say. It was at a conference. And the therapist who was doing this presentation, it had nothing to do with addiction, it had to do with other mental health issues. And he said, be careful what you think, it will leak out. And we know that 90% of communication is nonverbal. So if you're walking in there and you're like this, you guys know, do you ever have a conversation with somebody's like this? Right? And you have already made up your mind that so-and-so is just full of it, and she's making it worse, or he's making it worse, or Aunt Sally's making it worse. You're already going into that situation with a preconceived idea of what's up. I can guarantee you, 9 times out of 10, that's going to go horribly. That's going to go horribly. You're not going to change the other person's mind. How is that going to end? How is that conversation going to end? It's going to end in an argument. It's going to end with voices raised. It's going to end with both parties equally upset with one another. One person going this way, one person going that way, and neither one of you closer to being unified around this issue of addiction, which, by the way, whoever asked this question is probably the most important question. It's probably the most important place to start is, am I on the same page with the other people who love this person? Am I on the same page with the other people who are closest to this person? If you're not, guys, everything that we talk about tonight around setting boundaries and dealing with codependencies, if you're not on the same page with the important people in that person's life, it's going to be incredibly difficult to get anything done. It's going to be really hard to move the needle on recovery, because you're going to do something and they're going to do the opposite, right? If I go home tonight and I say, we're no longer supporting this, and then I walk out the door and I get in my car and I go to work tomorrow morning and my wife slides so-and-so $100, did I get anything done? Doesn't necessarily matter what I think in a situation. It matters what we think. So you got to start with the conversation. What other information or what other thoughts would you have around getting on the same page? Start with the conversation. What if the person doesn't want to hear it? Is that possible?
Yes.
Has that happened to anybody? Yes, it has. Well, we're all honest in here. Of course it has. We've been on the opposite side of it. What if the person doesn't want to hear it? I don't want to talk about that. I just don't agree. What strategy would you go to then? Education. Who said education? Who said that? Okay, education. Ricky, thank you. Education. How are you going to get them educated? Bribe them to come to a favor family group. Tell them you'll go out to dinner afterward. Tell them things like, just come check it out, right? Say whatever you need to say to get them to come to a favor family group. If you notice, guys, in this group, we're going to talk about certain things. We're going to always wind up talking about what? What is addiction? What is recovery? But we're also going to be touching on how do we do these boundary things. These subjects are going to come up. If you can get the person in the room, you're probably going to start this conversation. So you can get them educated. If you can't get them to come to favor, get them to try to go to another support group. If you can't get them to come to another support group, maybe they'll check things out online. How else do you get somebody educated on this that doesn't want to hear anything about it? How else?
Ask someone else to talk to them.
Try to have someone else talk to them. The defenses go way down. You guys get that? I'll hear it from Joe, the neighbor, but I will not hear it from my wife. Guys, anybody here ever remember the TV show Tim the Toolman, Home Alone? Remember the dude he would talk to, Wilson? You guys remember that? What was going on there is Tim was naturally working out his issues and getting advice from Wilson. And Wilson was going to be able to pull that off, whereas Tim's wife, trivia question, anybody remember Tim's wife's name? Good, because neither do I. You could have said anything and I'd have been like, yes, that's it. So Tim's trying to get his wife, he's not going to necessarily listen to it from his family, so he's having this informal conversation across the back fence. Now, it isn't about addiction, but it usually was related to some kind of life event or some kind of struggle he was having. So getting somebody else to kind of give some information, that can help immensely where these issues are concerned. Why would we listen to somebody else and not listen to our family? Anybody have any theories on that?
Well, there's just too much emotion.
There's way too much emotion. There's way too much emotion. There's also way too much water under the bridge. And again, it's very hard to be objective when you're talking about your loved one. It's very hard to be objective when you're talking about your child. So it's just very natural to become much more defensive. So if you have a situation where your loved one listens to a counselor or listens to a friend more than they listen to you, who cares, right? Just move the needle on that thing. Just move the needle. What other ways can you get them educated?
Send them videos.
Send them videos. Read books. Go check out the Recovery Cartel website. Go check out any other of these educational websites that are out there. Get information. And I really want to encourage everybody in this room, depending on what they're dealing with, you want to really be thinking who needs to be on the same page in this situation. This may not be the case, but many times when I've sat down, I don't get to do this a lot, but when you really dig into this with families, many times you'll find out that there are other influences beyond just mom and dad. Beyond just husband and wife. It goes a lot farther. It can be kids. It can be employers. It can be good friends. Do you guys get that? When we're in active addiction, guys, we're seeking validation. I don't know if we've ever talked about this before, but when you're in active addiction, you're actively using, there's this process, this internal psychological process that's going on. It's called cognitive dissonance. And what it is it's the difference between the values that you possess and you hold dear and your behavior. It's a basic kind of psychological principle. The values you hold dear and your behavior. Okay? So I want to be a good dad. I love my kids. I love my wife. I want to be a good husband. But I'm eating pills all day and I'm showing up to soccer practice high. You guys get that? That creates a tension between what? My stated values and my behaviors. And that tension can be alleviated by talking to people who minimize what I'm up to. Do you guys follow me? Who say what I'm doing is okay. If I find the right person that says what I'm doing is okay, what's that do? That calms me a little bit. But if everybody is sending the same message, and I don't mean be mean. This isn't about being mean. But this is about everybody consistently saying, no, Rich, this isn't okay. This isn't okay. Then that tension exists, and that internal tension, this is a psychological fact, guys. People change based on that internal tension called cognitive dissonance. When the dissonance gets great enough, we tend to make changes. But whenever I'm finding somebody to okay my stuff, when I'm finding somebody who says, it's all right, it's not that big of a deal, everybody runs out of their prescription in 3 days. We know that you've lost it 17 times in the last month, but hey, man, you live in a bad neighborhood. You guys get that? So we will seek out validation from people. We will seek out validation. That's one of the reasons why we gravitate toward other people using. Most people think that when we're in active addiction, we gravitate toward other people using just for what fact? Access to drugs, right? So if I'm hanging out with people who are using drugs, then I can get drugs easier. And there's a certain truth to that. But also, if I'm hanging out with people, what does that do to that tension? I literally am looking around, and if I create this situation where I surround myself only with people who are doing the same thing, do you see how I'm now creating this situation where I'm not that bad? Matter of fact, that guy is really bad. That dude's the one you want to stay away from. How many people in here have had their loved one, their son, daughter, husband, wife, give you a speech about how bad so-and-so is? Have you ever had that happen? And you're like, what? Like, yeah, man, Mom, Dad, I'm really concerned about George. You know, look at how crazy he got at the football game last weekend. And while he's talking to you, you're thinking like, wow, why can you not see that in yourself? That's because what you're doing is you're trying to like squeeze that down and you're trying to relieve that tension. So getting everybody on the same page, but it's important, guys. This doesn't mean we're getting everybody on the same page to beat up on the person. Do you guys get the difference? This isn't about let's get a circle of chairs and just hammer the person about how bad they are. That is not what I mean at all. It just means we're speaking with clarity. And we all know this is this thing called addiction, and it's a big deal, and we're not going to come off like it's anything else. You guys get that part? So you got to sneak them into the room. You got to get them to come. What else? Come to a meeting like this, learn about this. What else can you do if you have a bunch of people on different pages? or you have a key person on different pages. All right, you can do an intervention on the person who's not willing to look at this in the family. You can, if you have two people that are willing and you have grandma who's not, the two people that are willing can go over and have a conversation with grandma. Do you follow that? You can literally have an intervention on the person. What else can you do? Maybe that may be about it, right? That may be about it. What if you get in a situation where you feel like you can't get the other person on the same page? What do you do then? Anybody have any thoughts about that? You have to do something very dysfunctional at that point. You have to try to form a special relationship with the person in addiction and move them on yourself. Do you get that? You can't say, I'm not going to do anything just because we're not all on the same page. It would not be ideal. It would be very, very difficult. But it would almost be, can you get close enough to the person, despite the fact, let's just take a scenario. So you got me and you got my wife, and my wife thinks it's a problem, but my mom doesn't. Okay? So I'm going to my mom and I'm getting everything okayed. Is this making sense so far? Everything's fine, that kind of thing. My wife would have to try to just strengthen the relationship with me enough that she would be able to basically like override the opinion of my mom. And it would be very, very difficult, especially given the fact that I would be looking for somebody to validate my behavior. The other thing that you could do is she could bring in other people, right? I think I just talked about this, but she could bring in other people, and she could do it without my mom. There are sometimes, in certain circumstances, you got to do an intervention, you got to leave some people out. You just have to say, if I get so-and-so in the room, then this isn't going to go the right way. Good stuff.
Rich,
Yes.
what if you have like a divorced family and you really need both parents and they don't even like talking to each other? How do you get through that?
So you have to, if you're the coach in that situation, Carol, her question was, what if the parents aren't even communicating or talking on this matter? The parents have to start realizing exactly how serious this is influencing the situation with their loved one. That's where the counselor or the coach or the sponsor or whoever's involved with this family has to have a very uncomfortable conversation. If you have, and I'll go on a record and tell you right now, if you're in a situation where you got divorce and you got mom and dad and they're not talking to each other and their kid is in addiction, understand that they're putting their child at jeopardy. They're putting their child at jeopardy. This is one of those situations where you'd have to be able to say to them, like, put everything else off to the side. It doesn't matter. All the other baggage doesn't matter. So-and-so is actively, I'm making all this up, but so-and-so is actively using heroin. The only thing that matters is how do we get so-and-so into treatment? How do we get so-and-so into help? It would have to take that kind of conversation. There are absolutely situations where the family can take a look at certain things they're doing, and there's some low-hanging fruit, and you can immediately say to yourself, we got to do this different. We got to not argue when we're around our son, because when we're around our son and we start arguing about this issue, what happens? He immediately sees a crack in the armor. He immediately feels that. So you start to fake your way through that, and you wait till another time to kind of have the battle. But Carol, it's a very straightforward process. I mean, at Favor Greenville, we love you no matter where you are in the process, and we're going to support you. And we don't think setting boundaries is easy. And none of us are in an ivory tower where we would get it right if we were in your shoes. But there are just some stone cold facts. If you can't put this on the side to have a conversation about your kid in active addiction, then you're hanging them out to dry. You just are. And now, if you've been through it for so long that you're distancing yourself, that's different. You get the difference what I'm talking about, Carol? Like there's a situation where some people, where both parents will say, I can't have anything to do with this. This is killing me. That's a different story. You follow me? I'm not saying you have to hang in there just for the sake of hanging in there. People back off, people detach. I think we talked about detachment last week, right? This cartoon does not depict detachment. At the risk of sounding cliche, doctor, let me say that I have certain unresolved issues regarding my parents. Just a little joke, just a little codependency joke. Laugh it up a little bit. Codependency is defined a lot of different ways. It's a problematic way of interacting with another person. It doesn't only apply to addiction. That's important to understand. It wasn't invented in terms of addiction or alcoholism. It's any time people's relationships become enmeshed, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And it's usually within the framework of family rules and family systems, and has a lot to do with trying to protect each other, and has a lot to do with trying to keep family secrets and make sure that we're appearing the right way to the world. And it also has a lot to do with what? Fear. It's driven by anxiety, worry, fear, and what happens is over time a set of behaviors unfold that aren't healthy for anyone involved. And you're not aware when it's going on. It's not as if Wednesday, you have this normal kind of healthy boundary setting relationship, and on Thursday you wake up and all of a sudden you're enabling the heck out of everybody. It doesn't work that way. Do you guys think that there are certain personality types that are more set up and more likely to be codependent or enable? You guys think that? You'll see that in people, right? And they're usually, it's a good thing. It's because they're usually kind and caring. Sociopaths are less likely to enable. Narcissists are less likely to enable. So there's a good thing about trying to help another person. It's not, we can't, say this is all bad. Your desire to help your child, or your desire to help your husband, or help your brother, or employee, or whatever it might be, it's coming from a really good place. But what happens is, over time, it becomes problematic. And a lot of different kind of characteristics or behaviors start to emerge. People will report they start to have difficulty identifying their own feelings. Why would that be the case? Why would you start to have difficulty identifying your own feelings if you were codependent? Anybody got a theory on that? Think about it. Carol?
Because you don't want to make the person mad, and if you have different feelings of them, you may think
Could be. Could be. It could confront them. Well, one of the most common responses you would hear for that is your feelings really don't matter. What matters is your loved one's feelings. You're happy if they're happy. You're sad if they're sad. If they're angry, you're angry. You're very, very tuned in and overly concerned with how they're feeling at any given time. Now, why would that happen? Why would you get to a point where you would be so tuned into another person's feelings? What would be some of the experiences you would have that would get you there?
Well, it's a natural instinct.
First of all, it's a natural instinct. Yes.
As a mother, it's a natural instinct.
Yes. Here's one of the other things that happens when addiction enters the picture. You guys are around the person who's using, and you notice things about them. You pick up on things. I've heard people say this. I've heard people say that they can tell that their loved one was using by the tone of the text. I did not know that text had tones. Do they?
Yes.
That you can tell your love. I've heard people say, I can tell my loved one is using by the way he smiles, or by the way he stands, or by the way that they, not by their speech being slurred or anything like that, but their speech and the words they use and their attitude and things like that. So what's happened is you've had all these experiences that, where the person's been in trouble, the person's been using, and your brain, you've picked up on all this stuff. We talked about this 3 weeks ago when we talked about trauma. You've picked up on all this stuff. So for you, bad feelings equals what? Bad things is going to happen. Bad feelings doesn't just equal bad feelings. Bad feelings, anybody can be sad any given day of the week, right? You're allowed to be sad. You're allowed to be angry. But in the mind of a person dealing with addiction or alcoholism, bad feelings equals what? He's going to go off. He's going to go use. I'm not going to see him for 3 days. So you're super tuned in, and you're hyper vigilant around that issue. So you don't even really pay attention to how you're feeling. How many people? You should be putting yourself first. Actually, we don't use should at favor. we would recommend that you put yourself first. And you start to work on, so if you're going to remedy that, if you want to work on this tonight when you leave, you would literally, you can do it mentally or you can journal on it, you would literally start paying attention to your feelings and you'd start labeling your feelings. I'm sad today. I'm anxious today. I'm worried today. I'm angry today. Whatever it may be. And you actively start working on labeling your feelings, not labeling your loved one's feelings. I have these experiences, guys, and mostly when I was doing a lot of private practice, I would be doing family sessions, and I would get together with mom and dad, and I would say, "How are you doing?" And what do you think they would start telling me? They would start telling me what was going on with their son or with their daughter. They would not answer the question on how they were doing. And there were some times when there was really bad things going on with them personally. Work-related issues, health-related issues. How are you doing? It would never be about how they were doing. It would immediately be, oh, well, he just went off to rehab, and we're real hopeful because this program is very, very special. They feed him grapefruit 12, 13 times a day. We've heard grapefruit works wonders. I don't know why I'm talking about grapefruit. But you get, it was not, I had a bad day at work, or we're struggling in our relationship. So your feelings go out the side. And can you see how if you have trouble identifying feelings, you would have trouble expressing feelings? And then what typically happens if somebody has trouble expressing feelings? Do they go away? What happens? Come on, man, you all know this. They get stuffed and then you throw a coffee cup at somebody. Or you let somebody have it, right? Or you take it out on who? Another person who has nothing to do with the situation.
Or your stomach hurts. And
Or
your
you,
head
yes,
hurts.
exactly. You stuff it down in, your stomach starts to hurt. You know, I was reading the other day there are 70 plus health conditions related to chronic stress, hypertension, gastrointestinal issues, obviously depression, anxiety, that kind of stuff. So you push it down and you push it down, and what do? You learn to kind of compartmentalize and just deal with it, and you never express it, but you think it really goes nowhere. It eats you up. Carol, can you check and see if the heat is... Why, does anyone else feel like it's 875 degrees in here? Jeez. So difficulty identifying feelings, difficulty expressing feelings. What about difficulty forming and maintaining close relationships outside of the person who's going through this issue? So if you can't identify your feelings and you can't express your feelings, can you see how that would make it hard to have relationships?
It's easy to isolate.
It becomes very, very easy to isolate. We've heard it talked about in here before. You get to the point where you don't really want to talk to anybody. You don't want to go out to the grocery store and run into somebody and have them start asking you questions. So you start to isolate. What's the perfectionism and black and white thinking all about? Anybody have a theory on that? What's going on whenever you resort to perfectionism and black and white? And not everybody goes through all these things, right? This isn't like a list of every single thing you're going to experience. Yes?
Probably makes it easier.
In what kind of way?
Well, otherwise, I mean, trying to figure out why they're in addiction, how to get them out of addiction, all the variables.
Put you in categories, like a business plan.
Control.
Yeah. Well, it has a lot to do with control. It has a lot to do with control. You'll hear people talk if they're dealing with like heavy-duty kind of codependency issues, and everything's out of control with their son, everything's out of control with their wife, their husband. In whatever area they can control, they will overdo it. The house will be immaculate. The other kids will be super disciplined, and we will be all over them. That kind of thing. So what it is I can't control what's going on with so-and-so, so I'm going to control the heck out of all this other stuff. Does that one make sense? Rigid attitudes and behaviors, that has a lot to do with protecting yourself. And it has a lot to do with control as well. I'm not really going to I'm just going to I have my routine, I have my way of doing things, and that's also related to change, difficulty adjusting to change. So do those characteristics pass the test?
Can you say something about the black and white thinking?
So black and white thinking, it makes it easier. It makes it easy for you to understand what's going on. So black and white thinking is, Joey is in addiction. I am supposed to detach and not even give him a bologna sandwich. So therefore, I'm never buying bologna again. And boom, that's it. But then the problem is it tends to translate to other areas of your life as well. You sort of start to operate with, I got to have these categories because I got to have control, man. And if I have control and if I have an answer for this stuff and if I know how I'm supposed to do this and I do it, well, then we're going to, it calms you down a little bit. It becomes a coping skill. There's this idea that a lot of our self-defeating behaviors, when we first engaged in them, they were actually helpful to us. Does that make sense? So when you first, if you're dealing with black and white thinking or perfectionism, when you first start doing it, it actually serves a purpose. It probably relieves the person. Same thing with difficulty identifying feelings. If you shut your feelings off, at first you're probably better. But then it comes back and bites you. Were you going to say something?
I was just going to ask, are these results, are these characteristics that an individual might have who might lead you into codependency?
No, these are results.
Okay.
These are characteristics. And this isn't the type of thing where you're trying to do criteria. This isn't diagnostic in nature. These are just typical kind of things that people will exhibit. As well, here's a little bit more. Feeling overly responsible for the feelings and behaviors of others. That starts to make sense when you feel like all the things you have to do to deal with this issue. You're trying to rescue your son. You're trying to rescue your wife. You're trying to rescue your loved one. What's the constant need for approval from others? What's that all about? One of the things that happens when people enter into a codependent relationship or a codependent situation is they know they're bending over backwards for other people. And they get really, really frustrated when they don't get acknowledged for that. It's this phrase or this idea of don't do anything with expectations attached to them. So, scenario, you got mom and dad, you got Rich, you got my brother Brian, we're going and doing our thing, and, they're dealing with all their stuff, and so my mom goes out of her way to kind of throw a big birthday party for me, and I don't even say anything about it. And while she's doing it, she's thinking, I can't believe I'm doing this. This is so nice of me. With everything going on, I'm going overboard for him, and I don't even say anything, and she's angry. And that translates to a lot of different relationships. Does that one make sense? Difficulty making decisions. Can anyone relate to that? What's that all about? Why would it become difficult to make decisions? Just think about it for a minute.
You don't want to make a mistake.
You don't want to make a mistake, and you don't want to piss the other person off. Your decisions aren't your decisions because everything you're doing is sort of through this lens of what's best for so-and-so. So now you're not making independent decisions. And a general feeling of powerlessness over one's life, it can become hopeless. You feel like you have no control. There's nothing you can do. And a basic sense of shame and low self-esteem. Do these characteristics, and not everybody has these characteristics. And the thing about this, you have to understand something, guys. This is a naturally occurring process that comes out of addiction and alcoholism. This isn't because anybody in this room, if you've ever experienced any one of these things, it's not because you're flawed or there's something wrong with your thinking. This is a naturally occurring outcome of living with addiction. Does that make sense? If you didn't experience these things, you literally would have to you'd have to either be like a cyborg or a sociopath or a narcissist. I mean that wholeheartedly. If you're a human being and you enter into a relationship and this is going on, you're going to experience some of these things. You may not experience every single one, but you're going to experience some of them. Where your responsibility lies in this, or where this issue is you start to identify which one of these you feel like resonate with you and you start to course correct it. Does that make sense? It's not about the fact that you did these things or you've experienced these things. It's about the fact that you start to do something about it. And guys, doing something about it is a lifetime journey. So in my life, I've talked in this group a lot about growing up in an alcoholic home, right? I talked about growing up in a war zone, essentially. And you didn't have feelings. you literally did not have feelings. That's all there was to it. Life was better if you didn't have feelings. Do you guys get that? If you got sad, if I got sad as a kid, I'd still be in the fetal position in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
I still look at that Simon and Garfunkel song, and it was my song. It was I am a rock, I am an island.
Yes.
I mean, I was alone.
And in order to accomplish that,
so I kind of
yep.
just followed it through.
Yeah, in order to be a rock, in order to be an island, you have to shut off your own feelings. You have to like check out from your own feelings. And in a certain way, that can be a good thing because it helps you survive. But I did that for so long and so consistently. So there's this, running conversation in my family, and now this is very difficult for me to admit because I'm a therapist, right? I'm supposed to be like in touch with myself, man. And my 19-year-old daughter said to my wife, this is just recently, within the last month or two, does Dad have any feelings? Because I don't, when it comes to my family, I'm super shut down and super protective because I have never learned how to deal with that dynamic. Because it was ingrained in my mind at such a young age. Do you guys get that? Now don't worry, I'm okay. I'm working through it. I got people, I got my team to help me with that. I got my people to help me with that. It's not a horrible thing, but can you see how that would happen? Remember, when you're young, especially when you're young, is when a lot of these messages are sent. It doesn't have to happen when you're young, but a lot of times it does. That's why a lot of the codependency and enabling stuff had a lot to do with. Do you guys ever hear of a program called Adult Children of Alcoholics? That was a huge 12-step program back in the day. Now, it's interesting, they have faded away. ACOA groups have really, really faded away, but they used to be huge. And it had a lot to do with identifying these patterns in your life. If you can identify them, then you can work on it, right? You can work on it. I'm going to go home tonight, and I'm going to cry, man. Actually, I'm not, because I'm not sad. But when I get sad, I'm going to cry, man. That kind of thing. There is absolutely, and I know I went through this, but let me talk real quick about this. There are gender issues around expression of feelings. There's a book, if you ever want to read a very interesting book around this issue. It's called I Don't Want to Talk About It, and it's about male depression. And it's about how we've been taught in society, men especially, have been taught to what? Suck it up. Shake it off, suck it up, just go do your thing. And that served a purpose. That serves a purpose. You know, from a lot of different standpoints, that serves a purpose. But when it's taken too far, it can be problematic. So there's a lot of gender kind of issues around this. And you'll hear there's a term that's very interesting, and it's funny because in society it's actually seen as a badge of honor, and it's called compartmentalization. Have you ever heard the term compartmentalization? Compartmentalize. He knows how to compartmentalize. He knows how to compartmentalize. She knows how to compartmentalize. Let's be clear, guys. What that really is he knows how to stuff his feelings down. She knows how to stuff her feelings down. Now, if I know how to stuff my feelings when I'm walking in a business meeting, and I can stuff that for 45 minutes during that business meeting, that's a good skill to have. Do you get that? But if I never express that, and the next day I come in and I have to stuff it again, and the next day I come in and I have to stuff it again, all of us in this room have a breaking point. Every single one of us have a breaking point. And for some of us, it'll come out for some people it'll come out through drugs and alcohol. For other people it'll come out through rage. For other people it'll come out through just shutting down and not talking to anybody. For other people it'll trigger their anxiety or their worry or depression. But you have to let that out. You have to have a pressure release valve and let that out somehow, some way. And let's talk for a minute on how you get rid of that. How do you better deal with your feelings? How do you better express some of your feelings? Anybody have anything that they would want to share? Because this presentation doesn't have a lot about that. This is something we have to talk about at the group level. What do you do to deal with this stuff? What do you do to deal with some of these feeling issues? Yes?
Work out and swim a half mile.
So I'm absolutely a fan of exercise. But listen, here's what they say about exercise. Exercise is a Band-Aid. This is what some of the literature is coming. It works as a coping skill, but does it actually get you to a point where you feel like you get it out? How do you get it? What's that? You compartmentalize. Yeah, it's just it helps you compartmentalize. You get, and it's a good thing to do because it definitely, without question, lowers the negative effects of stress. So exercise, yes.
No, but after I exercise, I then talk to my wife about how do we deal with our kids.
So the biggest thing, guys, is talking about it. The biggest thing is about kind of confronting this thing, bringing it out, and talking about it in a way where you're actually vulnerable and it's okay to feel what you're dealing with. Not talking about it in a problem-solving way. Do you get that? You guys get the difference? In a
You're not old enough to remember primal scream therapy, are you?
Yeah, I've heard of primal scream therapy, and yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff going on back in the 70s and stuff.
It was, in the 70s it was.
Yeah, they had like day-long encounter groups back then. I don't recommend any of that kind of thing. Do you guys know when I say talk about it not from a problem-solving way, but talk about it from a feeling way? And that's just where you're exchanging information about it. If you want to watch a funny movie, or excuse me, a funny YouTube video, it's called Nail in the Forehead. Have you ever seen that? Anybody ever see that? Show of hands. So you got, what happens is the video starts and the camera pans in on this woman sitting on a couch, and she has a nail in her forehead, okay, and it's sticking out of her forehead, and her boyfriend's sitting right next to her, and she's looking at him, and she says, oh, I don't know what's wrong, I just got this headache, and it just won't go away. And he's like, it's because you have a nail in your forehead, let me take it out. And she says, why do you always want to solve the problems? Why can't you just sit and listen to me? Can't you just support me and listen to me? And then he's like, and then you can see he tries. He's like, okay, all right, I'm gonna do this. He says, tell me more, honey. And she says, yeah, and it's the oddest thing. It's really the weirdest thing. Like, all my sweaters have a hole, like right here, like they're getting caught on something or something like that. There's a hole in it. He's like, and he goes to say something and he's not going to say it at all. And then finally he loses it at the end, right? He just, you got a nail in your forehead, let me take it out. So the point with that is that when you're trying to express feelings, it's really just about what? Processing it. It's not about getting answers. Getting answers is a different exercise, and that's also important. It's really important to sit down and say, exactly what can I do about this situation? But it's not, sometimes you just need to be able to talk about it. And you don't have to do that the same way, like spouse to spouse. Men can express it differently than women. That's okay. There's no formula for that, but it's just talking about it to get it out. Yes?
Really helpful thing is to either journal or type it out. That way, like if you're angry or upset, you can process your own feelings before you try to share them with somebody else.
Yes.
I find that's like really cathartic.
Yes. So you can, writing or typing, getting the feelings out, doing that kind of thing. What about priming yourself for crying? If I were to say to you guys, here's the deal, here's the contest. Here's the contest. The first one of y'all who start crying, I'm going to give you $1,000. What would you do? What would you do? Like, what would be your response? You would think of something sad, right? Okay? You would think of something sad. But I would beat you. You want to know why I would beat you? Because I would get on YouTube and I would watch something sad. I'd watch Old Yeller. Anybody know what did they have that down here in the South? Oh, yeah. Okay, all right. One time I was doing family group and I said, did they have Rocky down here? And they were like, what are you talking about? No, of course we had Rocky. So watching something, listening to a certain type of music can prime emotion. And it's not even like you're trying to get to the point where you're crying. You're trying to well that stuff up. You're trying to get it going. And don't stop yourself when you start. A lot of this might have something to do with one-on-one relationships. Would you agree with that? Are you more likely to get in touch with your emotions in a one-on-one or in a group? I don't know the answer to that. A lot of people think one-on-one. What do you guys think? Or a small group, maybe.
Depends on the group.
It's going to be super difficult to do it with 50 people. This is something you're going to get done, and it has to be with somebody you trust, right? Has to be with somebody you trust. But go ahead and feel the emotions. Now, when it comes to other things like anger, I don't know how I feel about like rage therapy. I'm not sure what to make about that. I mean, I guess if you're in the car and you're feeling it, let it fly, right? Carol's back there nodding her head.
Yeah, remember the punching bag that I had to hit with the baseball bat?
So Carol's had an experience where she beat the hell out of a punching bag with a baseball bat. Would you characterize that as therapeutic, Carol?
That was extremely there.
Okay. I don't know. I'm not as nearly as familiar with expressing anger in terms of getting it out. I've been told that when you start on an anger binge, you keep on an anger binge. That's something that I've heard before. Carol's saying no, you can run it through, that kind of thing. There's a principle around dealing. Like if you are dealing with anger and it's getting out of control, it would be this thing called opposite action, where you would try to engage in something that brings you back down. But that's sort of the opposite of expressing it, right? What else would you do around anger? So we got sadness. What other emotions would you have to learn to express? Sadness, anger, worry, anxiety, fear. I think talking about fearful situations, that kind of thing. All right. The other thing that happens a lot of times is people will talk about, if they're dealing with codependency, a lot of people around them will think that they're very strong, self-sufficient. Why do you think people that are dealing with codependency come off to the rest of the world as can come off as being strong and self-sufficient? For all these reasons, guys. Because they're going around, they're stoic. They're hustling. And they're solving problems, and they're going here, and they're going there. Nobody actually gets to see the internal stuff that's happening and that's going on. And when you're dealing with addiction, there's another issue related to it. You're full of shame, and you're full of stigma, and so you don't talk about it. So all it looks like is this person's never upset. They always have somewhere to go, and they always have something to do. They're so busy. Current research into family systems is really that codependency is a condition that can emerge from any family system. This is important to know, and this is where you want to reframe your thinking around this issue. It's not an abnormal issue. It's a normal response. It's happening in every family. We are all going through some version of this, that kind of thing. All right. Anybody have any comments on any of the characteristics or anything that we've talked about to this point? Anybody have any questions about that? And it has a lot to do with the rules that arise to protect the family, protect the individual. You don't really want to talk about this outside the box, if you will. You learn to do things. The codependent learns to do only those things which will get him or her the approval and acceptance of others. You start to lose yourself. Does this make sense? Does anybody think have you experienced that? Yeah. You start to lose yourself because you're so concerned with what's going on outside of you. And so this graph has, when we're born and when we're little kids, like little kids, we're not super concerned about what other people think. Almost to, in some cases, maybe that can be detrimental because you can become too self-centered. But this idea of, I'm just doing my thing, I am who I am. When does that start to change?
Middle school.
Right around middle school. That's why we think middle school should be outlawed, right? Right around middle school, probably a little bit younger now. Probably, you could argue maybe much younger, maybe 3rd or 4th grade. When do kids start noticing differences and noticing that there's normal versus abnormal, okay versus not okay? Start dividing up into cliques and things like that. And you start to become concerned with what other people think of you. And the problem where codependency is concerned is you can lose that because as you start to grow, what's supposed to happen is you individuate. You go your own direction. You become your own self. Do you guys get that? So you deal with this, you go through this while you're in middle school, you go through this while you're in high school. We all can remember this. I have an ongoing joke about what lunch table did you sit at, right? I always say because of the things I say, because of how vocal I am, when I go to drug and alcohol treatment conferences, I have to sit at the lunch table by myself, right? because I don't say the right things, I don't think the right things, so I sit by myself at the lunch table. Don't look troubled, Linda. It's a figure of speech. Just kidding. But at what period of time? So what's supposed to happen is as you get a little older, I don't know how old that is. Maybe what? Certainly not in your 20s. In your 20s, you're still very concerned. But can you get to an age where you really don't give as much a crap about what people think? So, are you there yet? Yeah. I mean, it's a good place to get, right? I mean, it's really, if you can get to a point, and that's what will happen in a natural way. But the problem is when codependency or addiction enters into the picture, it stunts that process in relation to that other person. You may get to the point where, you know, you're like, I'm not so concerned what's going on out there, but you don't individuate because you become attached to this other person. Does that? And then you never get yourself. You never get yourself. You never get to be who you are without this attachment to these issues. And so it becomes such a part of the process, and it leads to this thing called enabling. We've all heard the word enabling, right? Enabling bad behavior, again, not just related to addiction. The greater you are, the greater the fusion, and what that means, the greater the connection between you and the person, the more likely you are to enable. And can you see how this makes sense? If you are fused to the person, you want the person to be happy, right? So that makes it very, very likely that you're going to enable whatever behavior makes them happy, because you want to be happy. And whenever you say, why, and you may have had this experience, maybe with your spouse, why did she give him money? Because she's trying to relieve herself. She's not trying to relieve him. Does this make sense to everybody? Because it's really important whenever you decide you're going to attack this, because you have to get a really good, clear look at what you're up against. Just like the person in addiction, we talk to people in addiction, we have them come in and we say, don't do drugs anymore. Like as if they're going to be like, oh, I never thought of that before. Right? Oh, Rich, you're a genius. I wish I'd have met you years ago. You would have. It's never that simple, because what's going on when it comes to this issue of enabling is the person is actually relieving themselves. When you bail your son out of jail and you bring him back home against your better judgment, it's not for him, it's for you. You are now doing that to relieve all the things that you were feeling, all that stuff, but also because you've become enmeshed and you're incapable of experiencing positive emotions without the person being positive. That's the theory behind this. Does this make any kind of sense? So you want to look deeper at that. What kind of comments do we have on that issue? You guys know, yes, sir.
I would say one of frustration, because some cases one spouse enabling and the other one just frustrated, like, wait a second, you hit your finger with a hammer or you're putting in a nail and you might try a screw next time.
But it's not, you're talking to somebody who's dealing with a whole different mindset and a whole different process. That's why you have to try to find a way to move them along.
I'm saying that the enabler is one view and the other party can have a totally different one.
Oh, absolutely. And that happens, again, remember, that happens in every given situation. I've told the story in here before where I came home and my wife's sitting there talking. She's on the phone with my daughter, and I hear her saying something like, you got AAA, you'll figure it out. And she hangs up, and I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, Megan was over at Nathan's house, and she didn't turn the interior light on in the car. She left the interior light on in the car, and the battery went dead. And this is like 8:30 at night, 9 o'clock at night. It's dark out. And I'm like, well, what are you going to do? She's like, I'm not going to do anything. Megan's like 21 years old. I'm not going to do anything. And I'm like, you can't let her out there. You can't. She can't be out there by herself. Now, I told myself that was what? Because I was fearful for her. The truth is, there was nothing to be afraid of. It was in my son's apartment complex, 100% safe. Do you guys get this? What was it? I have this, and who knows why it is with Megan. I have this thing where, like, I feel bad. And if she has to go through that uncomfortable situation, I'm going to feel bad. So me getting in my car and driving over to my son's house jump in her car, getting everything running. Hey, how's it going? Yeah, what's up? All right, love you. Okay, goodbye. Ruins my night, except it gives me relief. And that's what you want to. That's what you want to look into. It's usually not the surface issue. Now, it can be, because a lot of times you're dealing with very dangerous situations, right? So many times it can be just a straight up fear-based thing. I do not want to discard that. But also there's a lot of times it's probably a little bit more complex than that. And the reason why you want to acknowledge that is so you know what you're dealing with, and you know you're going to have to go deeper in order to conquer this thing. What other comments about enabling? Everybody here knows I'm not a big fan of the word, but there is no better word. Yes.
And I think the enabler can get to worst case scenarios very quickly.
They can go to the worst possible outcome. That's more of the fear-based kind of stuff. Would you guys agree with that? It's really easy to go from 0 to 60. Here's the worst thing that's going to happen if we set this boundary. Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree that drives it. I want to go on the record and say I'm not discounting the fear-based part of this, but I also want to go on the record and say that in many cases it even goes deeper than that. It even goes deeper, and that goes to that thing where I can only feel comfortable if they're comfortable. I am only okay if they're okay. That kind of deal. What other comments about enabling or thoughts? Yes, sir.
Rich, what is it that makes people that are the enablers unable to see this situation while others can clearly see it?
It's defense mechanisms. What a great segue. Look what you... yes. And basically, like with anything else, we use defenses to justify our behaviors. And so our mind kind of sets up and we look at things differently. This one that they're talking about is rationalization. Repression, projections, that kind of thing. We find ways to make it okay. We find ways to justify this behavior in our mind because we're not able to deal with the disconnect. It's too uncomfortable. Does that make sense to everybody here? It's just too uncomfortable. It's like the person who's dealing with drugs. Think about me when I was in active addiction. Wrecking the car, not coming in at night. Everybody around me can see that it's a problem. But if you'd have been in my head, I would acknowledge it for a minute, but then I would go to this place. And that was because I was unwilling to escape, pull back from the drug. So you set up these defenses and these mechanisms to be able to tell yourself that it's okay. Does that make sense? Anybody else want to comment on that? Yes.
What about love?
What do you mean by that?
Well, sometimes you are not thinking that you're enabling you out of love.
Yeah, so you go back to this idea of rationalization, or however you want to say it, or justification. You can look at this. You can look at a situation and label it two different ways. We all can in any given circumstances, and it actually can be love. But when it becomes problematic, when it leads to issues for the person, when it leads to issues for you, that's where maybe you're getting at, sir, where you're saying like the person's unable to look at it for what it is. Because you can look at any one of these situations. You guys all can think of a circumstance in your mind when you've done something for your loved one and you wish you wouldn't have. I'm sure that's happened, where you've said, oh, maybe that wasn't the best way. And you could probably justify it by saying it was out of love. Do you get that? You can probably say that I did that and you wouldn't be that it wouldn't even be false. But the idea is, how do you step back and take a more objective look at it? Remember, if you think about love also involves setting boundaries. It's the appropriate expression of love. Love also means doing those difficult things and having those difficult conversations. So I've said it here before. If I go home tonight and my 4-year-old son wants to drive my car, because he's all into cars, I love him, right? And it would make him really happy to drive my car, but out of the appropriate expression of love, I have to say, no, you can't drive that car. That's a very, very juvenile kind of like, maybe not the best example but you can think of other things. Love is an action word, not a feeling.
Wait, say that again?
Love is an action, not a feeling. the emotion of love, or the emotion of lust, or the emotion of that romantic love that you see on TV. You know, all that hoo-ha BS stuff, right? That's cool for a minute, but you guys, if you're married in here, y'all know what I'm talking about. I mean, I hope Melissa's not watching. But, I mean, it moves on to a decision, right? It moves on to a decision. And when my wife made a decision to set boundaries out of love, right? It was out of love. It wasn't just to protect her. It was also because it was the right thing to do for me. This is an important conversation, guys, because if you tell yourself that I'm taking care of them, or I'm making it okay because I love them, you also have to challenge yourself and say, you know, is that the appropriate expression of love? Am I putting them in a position? And now everybody in this room has to look at their individual situation. Do you guys get that? You can't paint with a blanket statement and say, you should do this or you should do that. That's not what I mean by this at all. But you want to say, love doesn't always equal doing what feels good to the person. Can we all agree on that? That's maybe a better way to say it. Sometimes love actually requires doing something that makes the person very, very uncomfortable, even angry, that kind of thing. Great conversations. All right, this might answer the question you had a little bit better. Deluded about, why do people enable? Why do they continue to do it, even though it's obvious? They're deluded about the situation. That's sort of what I was just trying to say. They just simply can't see it for what it is. They're unable to see their own behavior. This whole idea they have a blind spot. You guys ever heard the phrase, so-and-so has a blind spot? They just have a blind spot around it. That's one possible explanation. They're so worn down, feelings of apathy, tiredness, inadequacy. It doesn't matter what I do. They're just sort of giving in. Can anyone relate to that? It's literally the path of least resistance. I'm just going to, here's the money, shut up. That kind of thing. I know for sure that one of the key strategies I had when I was in active addiction was I would win the war of attrition. I would just wear you down, man. Early on, when I was out there, I had good creative lies that I would come up with. You know what I mean? Like, they were very creative. But then toward the end, it was just, I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I saw you. No, you didn't. Prove it. Prove it. Prove it. That kind of stuff, right? And literally, at times I would say, prove it. Prove it. Prove it. What an idiot I was. Like, sometimes I look at myself and I'm seriously, what an absolute idiot buffoon I was, right? And my wife would what? Just I don't want to hear it anymore. So you just get so worn down, that kind of thing. Somebody talked about fear already, right? Big deal. Worst case scenario thinking, able to go 0 to 60 in that regard. And then the other theory, the other idea is some people are caretakers. They feel good about taking care of another person. And you can see how addiction would feed right into that process. Would anybody add anything to this list on why people would continue to enable when everyone else was seeing it? Would anybody? Yes?
Is it possible that you just want to never feel guilty?
Oh, yes.
You want to make sure that you did everything in your power, and so that you never will have to say, I could have done more.
I think that's great. The comment was, guys, could you just do it out of this idea of preventing guilt? And that's actually like a really, really good category. I would agree that is the case. I think this idea of, I have done every single thing that I possibly can. And it would become a problem when you kept looking under the same rock for another solution over and over again. And you start to realize I have done everything I can, but then you continue to do it. But absolutely, that could absolutely motivate it. Yes, sir?
I was just thinking about they would derive their self-worth having to be the caretaker to the addicts.
And a lot of that would fall under, I agree with you, some of that falls under here too. That you actually, like, that's your purpose. Right. You'll hear people talk about that, especially when it's been going on for a long time.
How about if a person feels like
they're the only one that person is really open to and is very important to that person.
Yeah.
But everybody else, they have cut off.
Yeah.
And not talking. And if I don't talk or do something bad's going to happen.
I'm the only person.
Cut off everybody else in the family, and I'm the only one.
I'm their only hope.
I'm their only hope.
Yep.
And the fear that.
Yep.
If I don't do this, something bad's going to happen.
This is a great. So the comment was, what if, for some folks or for some families, it'll go down where there's like one point person. You know, I'm the only person left to help this person, and if I don't step up, man, nobody's stepping up, and this is going to get horrible. Now, that is a very real issue in some families, and this is like everything else we're talking about. It starts off legit. In most of these cases, you know, your intentions or a person's intentions to kind of like be responsible and take care of the situations and look under every rock and not feel guilty. That's not the problem. Remember, that is a common response. The problem is what? When it continues too long and it spins so far out of control that it's actually creating the opposite of what you want to have happen. Do you guys get that? It isn't the behavior in and of itself. The behavior in and of itself is a natural thing. And in many cases, it's a necessary thing. It's a problem when it goes on at such an intense level that not only are you destroying yourself, you're probably promoting the other person's self-destruction. Do you guys get all this? Because I want to make this very, very clear. If you've rescued somebody or helped somebody or bailed somebody out of jail or let somebody sleep on your couch against your better judgment, that is not the problem. The problem is if it just becomes so repetitive. And you'll know, guys, because first of all, it'll be destroying you. How do you know whether it's destroying you? All the things we talked about earlier, but you guys probably instinctually know. You're not sleeping at night. It's affecting all your other relationships. You can't concentrate at work. Do you know in the northern states, in the Northeast, where the heroin epidemic has been raging for about 12, 15 years, it's having an economic impact because parents cannot concentrate at work. Productivity has dropped. People are getting laid off. People are getting fired because they can't concentrate at work. That's what I mean. It starts to become such a problem that it affects all these other areas of your life. You guys identified this already. 70 different medical issues. We got to keep saying this. This issue or this disease will kill you early too. Do you guys get that? I mean, how many people in here have gone without sleep before? I mean, I go without sleep and I'm clueless, right? I got a headache all day. Have you ever had that feeling? You just got a headache all day. You're kind of like sick to your stomach. That's the stress. That's everything building up on us. That's everything. It will tear us apart too. That's where it starts to become a problem. That's where you start to say, what can I do different? And you'll find that a lot of people will start to do something different when they get to this place, they'll call it, they get to a breaking point. Where they get to a point where they're almost like, I can't take this anymore. I don't want to do this. I don't want to let them sit in jail, but I can't take this anymore. That kind of thing.
Okay, so all about enabling and everything, I totally can respect, there has to be a boundary because you are helping that person, or you can be helping that person that has an addiction, whatever it is. But also, I think that you really have to set a degree of the issue of addiction to that person. Because I also think that, let's say an innocent mother and a drug addict son, well, I think that if the mother is constantly always talking about him being on crack, or no, I'm not going to give you this $5 if you need help with whatever because you can listen to them on crack, or I'm going to give you a lift here because you can go pick up, from there. I think you have to be really, really careful because that, I think it can be an addiction itself, become obsessed. So if you are continuously talking about crack, that son probably, is again every case.
So yeah, you're absolutely right.
You're planting that seed.
What you're doing is you're getting.
Son's head.
Yeah, you're getting into a cycle.
Right.
So and that's also where the word codependent came from, because basically what can happen is that you have a person in addiction, and then you have a person addicted to all the cycles around the addiction. And yeah, so you're absolutely right. It can go a lot of different ways.
So I think it's like you really have to kind of take it easy, talk about some other things besides drugs or drinking, if that makes sense. Because that in itself, that can become an addiction of obsession.
You can talk, yeah, and we've had that conversation in here, and I've had that conversation personally when I've worked with people. Just talk about the weather, or talk about the football game, or just talk. You don't want this to become your life. You don't want addiction to become your life, because again, then that becomes dysfunctional for everyone involved.
Right.
But also understanding that that's easier said than done, just like it's easier said than done for the person who's addicted to drugs. I can't just look at a person addicted to drugs and say, just quit. It's going to be the same process for the family. You're going to go through things. You're going to work on this, and you're going to make 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps forward, 1 step back. But I do want to go on the record and tell everybody in this room, all the family members in this room, that you do have a right to kind of like put yourself first and step back. Now, there's this idea or this concept of detachment, which has kind of gotten really sort of overblown, or not really. I believe it's sort of been a little bit mismanaged or misrepresented. Detachment isn't I won't talk to the person. Do you guys get that? Detachment is not don't ever talk to Rich. Don't have anything to do with Rich. Detachment is trying to remove yourself emotionally from the outcomes of situations and start to set boundaries around the things that make it difficult for you to remove yourself. Detachment does not mean, and it was never intended to mean, do not talk to the person in addiction. I heard somebody say, and you guys have heard me say this in here before, I heard somebody say, don't even give them a bologna sandwich. Don't even give them a bologna sandwich. I heard a person say that, like a person who described himself as a professional say that. And again, I've joked in here before, like, first of all, who the hell wants a bologna sandwich, right? When was the last time any of us ate a bologna sandwich? That's the first thing. And the second thing is that's not what we mean by detachment. Literally, what we mean by detachment is take care of yourself, step back enough from the situation where you can make better decisions, and don't become so connected to the person that every single thing they do affects you. Step back, detach from the situation. It doesn't mean disappear. That's an important distinction. Just like the term tough love. It's not about tough love. Tough love's been mismanaged because it implies you got to be tough. It has nothing to do with being tough. It has to do with what? Being consistent. It has to do with mean what you say what you mean, but don't say it mean. It has to do with the fact of the appropriate expression of love. There's this weird vibe that we have to make sure we stay out of as family members and those of us in recovery. And it's this idea that you can punish the addict into recovery, and if I'm tough enough, and if I'm mean enough, and if I extract my pound of flesh, then that'll teach that person a lesson and they'll get into recovery. That'll backfire, and also nobody's ever really been punished into recovery. That's not how, if you believe it's a brain disease, you can't really punish the person into recovery. Now, what you can do, and again, I think this is the 5th time I've said this tonight, you can put yourself first, and you can take care of yourself first, and you can put your needs ahead of the person's needs. You're allowed to do that. You're an individual person. If it's a child and they're under 18, I think that's a different story. You probably got to take care of them. But you have an adult child, you're allowed to put yourself first. But that doesn't mean it has anything to do with tough love or punishment or anything like that. And I feel like that's a vibe that we want to try to avoid as much as we can. You also will be in situations, guys, where you have to set boundaries and you have to step back just out of your own self-preservation. I mean, people, when we get deep into addiction, we can do things, we can take advantage of people, people will steal to support their habit, they can be mean, they can get sideways. Do you guys get that part? Sometimes you just got to step back based on pure self-preservation. All right, let's go through some of this. I want to talk about one other thing.
You're not going to explain that Bowen's differentiation?
I can't. I don't have time right now. I'll do this next time, all right? This is a scale. I can rate y'all. Ooh, anybody want to get a score? Addiction screening instruments. We love giving people scores. That kind of thing. All right. I did want to talk a little bit because we're not going to have a lecture between now and the holidays. Man, I got so much good stuff to go through here. These are some of the rules that keep people stuck in patterns. But I want to talk about some of the deal around dealing with the holidays for you guys. Wait, I don't have it on there. After all that, it's not in there. So let's talk about the holidays for a minute. You want to be very, very kind to yourself during the holidays, and you want to guard against your feelings. You want to guard against these issues of codependency or enabling or whatever label you want to put on it. You want to guard against it during the holidays, right? Because what? The holidays are full of all the images, all the BS Lexus commercials. Have you all seen the Lexus commercials? Right? You know what I'm talking about? The perfect family. The girl hugging on the car and everything. And so basically the Lexus commercial, basically what they're saying is that your family sucks, our family's great, go buy a Lexus. That kind of stuff. And all the holiday family stuff. That may conjure up negative feelings for family members dealing with addiction. It would be natural for y'all to go through that, right? So really, really try to get yourself to meetings and try to get your support group around and give yourself a break. There is no such thing as the perfect family. It does not exist, guys. And there's this idea or this thing that you sometimes deal with when you're in the holidays and you know, you've lost a loved one, or so-and-so's in jail, or so-and-so's in rehab, and it's called the empty seat. And it's dealing with this idea of who's not here. Okay? So let's be real careful and real kind to ourselves as you go through that. Come to these groups if you need to. Get to other support groups. But understand that this will be a difficult time. It will also be a difficult time in terms of setting boundaries. This is when most people get bailed out of jail, right? What? Because you want them home for the holidays. Understand something when you're making those decisions. I don't judge you, but they're just as likely to steal from you on Christmas morning as they are on Wednesday. Do you guys get that? Like when you're in addiction and your brain is in this state of mind, right? Where's my brains? Right? This is a brain issue. These are just different MRI slides. This is no longer a debate. The brain is fundamentally changed where addiction is concerned. They don't care whether it's Christmas morning or Monday morning. It's all the same. Because you're into that seeking pattern of behavior. You're into that obsessive thinking. So if you do that, if you have somebody come home or you bring them home for a home pass, this is another thing. I remember I used to run an adolescent facility, man, and families were begging us to send their adolescent son. It was boys. 172 adolescent boys. Can you imagine that program? Well, that's what we had. 172 on about 250 acres in western Pennsylvania. And everybody wanted their kid to come home for Christmas, and we'd have a clinical team meeting, and we would talk, and some people would get approved, and other people wouldn't. And I was the clinical director, so I would always get what call would I get? The pissed off mom. And they would say things like, "I hope you're happy for ruining my Christmas, and how would you feel, and are you married, and what would your wife say?" And I'd be like, "Holy cow." And sometimes we would give in against our better judgment. Basically it was a voluntary program. They could leave anyway. So here he is, Mrs. Jones, right? And then the kid would never come back. Terrible things would happen because what mom or dad couldn't get in touch with was that young man was going home, and it wasn't with that mentality. It wasn't with that process.
This is going back to the brain scan. Do you think, this is what my kid always said, something's wrong with my brain, Mom. Why am I the only addict? I want an MRI. Well, you can get an MRI for $1.99. But do you think now, as more addicts are coming out like every day and dying, do you think they're going to make that one of the processes of letting an addict look at his brain?
So I think MRIs are too expensive to begin with, but I think that part of the answer to this issue is addiction care will go back to health care. This is something that's going to happen. You're going to see rehabs essentially go away. Now there will always be a need for rehabs, but you can see them get cut down in about half as many And you'll see that this will be integrated into healthcare, and there'll be referrals for MRIs and things like that. It is ultimately part of the solution. We are 5 or 10 years away from that happening yet, but there's no question the effort nationally is to move addiction services back to healthcare. The idea that you go off to a rehab is really, really unusual for a healthcare issue, right? Like the idea that it's not primarily addressed through a hospital system or a healthcare system is very, very strange. You don't get rushed off to, the diabetes rehab. You don't. Now we know that there will be a need for some people to go certain places, but so to answer your question, I think you will be able to see this. I always joke all the time, I want to buy an MRI machine here at Favor. We set it up in here, and we'd have a blast, man. Let me go through again, dude. Let me go through again. You got your ticket? Yes.
Rich, I've got a practical question. You know we've been dealing with this for a long, long time. Our son is talking to you guys now. And I'm going to be the first one to admit that I was one of the detachments. And the reason was because every single time we communicated with him, it did not have a good outcome.
Right.
It either cost us money, whatever. There was no good outcome. So I just got where I wouldn't talk.
Right.
Jan, on the other hand, she was the classic, I'm the single point of contact that's left, and I don't want to cut that off. My problem with that was you're also the single point of enablement.
Yeah.
Now, and there's a fine line there. But now we're struggling a little bit with, every time I've talked to him, and I've talked to him 2 or 3 times in the last couple of months, and he's even told me I'm so sorry for being such a terrible son and everything. And I've told him, you're not. You're still a good person. You just got some bad habits that we got to beat. But I'm having a hard time right now figuring out where is the right amount of communications, because and Jen she loves all the boys to death, but she wants to immediately, okay, let's talk to him again.
So it's a great question. The right amount of communication is whatever amount of communication you're comfortable with. There is no right amount. So there are people who talk to their kid every single day, and that's fine. There are other people who can only handle once a month.
It's not the amount of talking right now. It's just my years and years of experience was these discussions don't end.
Well, then that's your answer right there. Do you guys get that? So what you do is you be true to yourself. And if you got that this is so important. And we'll end here, guys, so nobody leave, because this is the most important thing. Listen to the voice inside your head that is saying, the last time we did this didn't go well, so right now I'm going to be cautious. Do that. If you want a default setting, be cautious. Make the person, make the change occur over a longer period of time. That doesn't mean be mean. It doesn't mean cut it off altogether. It doesn't mean be punishing about it. But it's this idea of what you're doing when you become an enabler, guys, and you become codependent, you shut that voice off inside your head and say, nah, that's just me being a knucklehead. I'm being overly dramatic about this. Honor yourself. All right. You got to get it quick.
But what if you're a couple and you're not,
You got bribe?
The example that you are talking about with this couple, I feel like my husband and I are on separate pages. I mean, he wants to detach and not have anything to do with him, and I want to.
But Linda, remember, if you were paying attention earlier, you got to get him here. You got to tune him up. You got to get him here, or get. Well, I guess you can't now that I just put that on Facebook. Oh, okay. We'll have to talk about that. But in my best interest, guys, I got to shut this thing down for tonight. So next week we will be here, and it'll be a regular group. If you haven't checked out one of our regular groups, it's an open discussion. We would encourage you to come to that. And does anyone else have any other announcements related to favor or recovery? All right. If we could we please get a moment of silence for those still suffering with this disease and for the family members brought to this no choice of their own, followed by the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. All right, we are good, guys. Thank you very much.